is we can hear you, but we cannot mute now. Allow participants to unmute themselves. Yes, I've checked that 4 times. Try it again.
I can unmute.
Okay, now we can unmute ourselves.
I clicked that 4 times, guys. I'm so sorry. All right, so shall we start over? How about we start over? Did you guys all hear what I said? The exam's 39 questions. You have an hour to do it.
Yes.
Yes.
Mostly,
Yes, ma'am.
it's multiple choice, couple short answer. Okay, anyway, sorry about that. I don't understand. I was clicking that 4 times, but we're good now. So what questions do you have? Anyone?
So I put a question in the discussion board, but I was just asking, I know we talked about how there are some species of mycoplasma that are normal flora and they're not pathogenic. Then there's other species that do cause disease. But for chlamydia, are there any species that are normal flora or it's always pathogenic?
There are some chlamydia and chlamydia that are normal flora, but I only spoke about the ones that are pathogenic, right? And there's way more. There are way more mycobacterial organisms, not mycobacterium, mycoplasma organisms than you would ever. There's way more normal flora organisms than there are pathogenic strains.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And I'm sorry, Zoe, I checked that. You must have just put that question in recently because I checked this morning and there was no question on the discussion site.
Yeah, it was just a few minutes ago. I forgot that this Zoom was happening.
Oh, okay. All right, good. I did check and there wasn't any questions yet. What else do people have?
Bless you. Bless you.
I had a question about the morphology of fungus. It looked like on a lot of the PowerPoints there wasn't much about morphology. Do we just need to know it's dimorphic or any specific characteristics of it on a plate?
No,
So not on a plate. So, but there are characteristics of the dimorphic fungi that their yeast phase are very classic for that particular organism, right? So with sporothrix, those cigar-shaped yeast inside of macrophages, and there's an abundance of them in cats because they replicate to high levels in cats. And so that is really classic for that fungus. But on a plate, you see a lot of hyphal growth, and you wouldn't be able to tell, you yourself or me, who's not a mycologist, wouldn't be able to tell those molds apart. Does that make sense?
Oh, okay, thank you.
So, and for example, with Cryptococcus, that yeast and all of that polysaccharide capsule that it makes a tremendous amount of polysaccharide capsule. And that is very characteristic of Cryptococcus. And so that's why that capsule, the presence of that capsule and that India ink stain, showing the lack of staining and the presence of the capsule, that's classic for Cryptococcus. That helps you or the veterinarian or the person in the lab make the determination of what is happening in that animal.
Okay, that makes sense.
So
Thank
that's
you.
those kind of specific traits you should be aware of, right?
Okay.
What else, folks?
I've got a question. I was looking at the Ehrlichia species, and it looks like a lot of them are defined by the morulae, the clusters inside the cells. But then there's also
the cell type they infect. The morula look pretty similar, organism to organism, but the cell in which they infect is distinct. Does that make sense?
Okay, absolutely. So the moruli, though, are those unique to Ehrlichia as well as Anaplasma? It looks like those are the only two categories of bacteria that express those.
Of the ones, yeah, of the ones that I talked about, that's what their replicating bodies are called.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Mhm.
For the Coccidioides species, can you talk about the spherules that they transform into?
Yeah, so that is, they inhale, animals and people inhale the spores that are out in the soil. And then once they're in the host, those spores transform into the spherules, which are essentially the replicating body. And so you have a structure where then there's a lot of more what they're called endospores made. And so it's a way to replicate itself inside the host. And then it ruptures, it releases those endospores, and each of those endospores in the host then can give rise to a new replicating body. So it's all a replication structure that is produced inside the host. And it's not something that occurs, out in the environment.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. So all of these dimorphic fungi have a way to transform into something that replicates inside the host. So the dimorphic fungi are mold and spores, out in the environment, and then they transform into a different replicating structure, often a yeast, inside the host. And that replicating structure, or that yeast, has a characteristic appearance that helps you determine what's happening in that animal. These are good questions. Have you guys been able to study it all, or is this now the first time we're looking at the material?
I've studied a little before this, but I've kind of been slammed with multiple things. So
we know how it goes. But right. So you have bacteriology on Wednesday, right? And then you have physiology on Friday, right? So you know what my tests are like. All of you guys know. And hopefully and this is consistent with questions that I ask. And so I guess, so I want you to be prepared for bacteriology, but I also don't want you to wait till Wednesday to start studying physiology, okay? So try to use your time wisely and do both things. And you know yourself by now which course you need to spend more time on. Like if you feel that, so my tests are predictable, now you know what you're facing. If you feel that requires more of your effort than physiology, go ahead and do that. But if you think that you have a handle on bacteriology, just don't study bacteriology till Wednesday and then start on physiology. That's what I'm saying. Just, I want you to be prepared for both exams. Okay. Okay, so pay attention to what things are zoonotic, right? That's important.
Just had like a question. I think it's kind of a simple one about that, but for the tularemia, that's a reportable disease and a select agent just because of like cleaning like rabbits carcasses without gloves, and because humans get it that way, or are there others?
So the reason it's a reportable, you're asking why is it a reportable agent? It's because it can be transmitted by numerous means, one of which is aerosol transmission, and because people can get sick with very, very low numbers of organisms. And so it's the select agent status has to do with really with bioterrorism and how likely a particular agent can be used as a bioterrorism agent, right? And so it reaches select agent status because of the tremendous numbers of ways it can be transmitted, but especially aerosol transmission and the low numbers of organisms that that can cause disease, right? Even though it occurs naturally, right? So the fact, so you can have things that are select agents, and they can be, you can have naturally occurring disease because of that agent. So it doesn't, disease doesn't mean there's been a bioterrorism attack. It just means that somebody could exploit that agent for nefarious purposes.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So kind of going off of that, are select agents usually reportable? They sound very similar to me, and I just have a hard time distinguishing the main difference.
So select agents, yes. So diseases caused by select agents are often reportable. So select agent status is determined by lots of things. We've talked about this all year long, and then Dr. LaFontaine works on a select agent Burkholderia. And so select agent status is given primarily for people who are doing research with the organism, so that it means this organism is so dangerous, potentially dangerous, and could be exploited for terroristic purposes, that it's given that select agent status. So if you want to do, if you're somebody at University of Georgia and you want to work on Burkholderia, or you want to work on coccidioides or any of those things, because they're so, if you aren't careful, you could cause serious harm to others. There's a whole set of guidelines that you have to adhere to in order to be able to do research with those agents. And often those agents are reportable. So there's naturally occurring disease anyway, like, anthrax is a select agent. So if I wanted to do research on that organism, I'd have to follow select agent protocol. Anthrax is also, if it occurs in cattle, not because of some terroristic action, just because the cows were exposed out on pasture to that organism and they developed anthrax, I'd have to report it because it is a reportable disease. And if it's occurring in an area, the state vet needs to know it. Does that make sense? So they are select agent status and whether something is reportable. Chances are, if an agent is a select agent, chances are pretty high that the disease that's caused by that agent would be a reportable disease. But the reportable status means you're reporting a case of the disease. A select agent status is a category of classification of an organism saying that this is potentially a serious public health threat. Does that make sense to you guys? You guys get what I'm saying?
Yes, thank you so much.
Okay. And the reportable diseases will vary state by state, right? There will be a lot of things that are uncommon, but it's not. But there's not 100, like most things in the United States. We have differences state to state. So when you're studying the antifungal drugs, right, it's just the classifications of the drugs you need to know. And they have to understand their mechanism of action, how they work, like what are their targets, right? And the only specific antifungal agents you have to know are amphotericin B and nystatin. The other names of the agents you don't have to know, just the classification. Are we good? You still have the discussion site you can use. And so please do use it. And remember, I'm never trying to trick you, right? Even so, don't overthink. Pay attention to stuff that I have bolded in my notes, right? Pay attention to things that are zoonotic. Make sure you know which ones are the dimorphic fungi. Okay, I'm still grading the lab exam because there was a lot of stuff to hand grade, but I will get that done this week. And so hopefully you'll know by end of the week, you'll know your final grades for bacteriology. All right, thank you guys. Either email me directly